In this lesson, we'll use duplicate special again with instancing this time to finish out the engine. So for the engine, for the back, we need to have some kind of thin panels that are going to form this sort of thrust ring around the back here that we can rotate in and out. So let's create one of the panels. And so I'm going to go ahead and create a polygon primitive cube. And let's go ahead and bring this in. And we'll kind of move it into position. You can see here that I've added just a little bit of subtle detail on the engine, just with some isoparms, and tweak the shape just a little bit. But anyway, here is our cube. We want to go ahead and just kind of scale it up, and we want to make it kind of nice and thin, but we want to make it fairly long. So we want it to go inside this part of the engine here, but we want it to come out so that it is not all the way to the end, but maybe something more like that. So something like that. And we want it to be a bit wider at the base than it is at the end. And so I'm going to go ahead and just grab those points there and scale those out a little bit. And then we can take these in a little. Okay. And I also want it to be a bit thicker, I think, at the base. So I'll thicken that up a little bit, and then I'll actually just thin this down just by taking those points and making them a little bit thinner. Now, anytime you're working with polygons in computer graphics, the edges are going to be really sharp. And so what we want to do is actually add a little bit of geometry along those edges. We can do that by using a bevel. So let's go ahead and freeze our transformations. And then we're going to go to our polygons menu set, go to Edit Mesh, and we'll choose Bevel. Now you can see that it added a very small bevel. You can almost see something happen there. We're going to go into the offset, and we're going to increase that offset amount, and there you're able to see that. So now if we back up, you can see we get a nice thin line of polygons along those edges, make it look a little bit more realistic. Okay, so we can set our offset if you want it to be a bit thinner. You can set that as well. You can also increase the number of segments in the bevel. So if you want to have more geometry along that bevel, you can do that as well. All right. And so now what I want to do is to go ahead and create a group for this. And I'm just going to go ahead and call this Thrust Geo. And then let's go ahead and create a group. And let's go ahead and center the pivot of that group. And we'll call this Thrust Instance, if I can spell correctly. And I want to move the pivot of this group by hitting Insert and move the pivot right back here at the base, kind of inside here. All right. Now I want to go ahead and group the group. So we have a group here, which you can see if we rotate it, we can rotate it like this. I want to create another group, and we'll just call this Thrust Group, and I'll leave the pivot where it is. Okay, so at this point, I want to create now a bunch of these all the way around. So let's go ahead and duplicate one of these and then rotate it. Okay, now you can see we'll rotate it till the base sort of matches up here. That's going to be about 30 degrees. Okay, so let's go with that as our value. So again, I'll select this. I'm going to hit the up arrow once and twice to get to our top level of our group. Now we're going to go to Duplicate Special. And this time, instead of choosing Copy, we're going to choose Instance. And Instance will allow us to create a bunch of different copies and then modify those copies just by modifying the original instance. And so we want to actually rotate again around the Z. So we want to change our value here. We want to rotate it 30 degrees, each copy. So if we're going 360 degrees around, and each one is 30 degrees, that gives us 12 copies total. And we already have one, so we're going to input 11 into the number of copies. Let's go ahead and duplicate special. And now you can see that we've created instances of this. So if we go ahead and select our original and go up to the Thrust instance, I can now rotate this down, and all of the other instances rotate as well. Okay, and so let's rotate those down until that bottom ring matches up also. Now if there are areas where we want to actually modify this geometry, we can go ahead and select our original here. And so we'll select the geometry, and then we could scale it down and modify it that way as well. And you can see how that changes everything. Okay. And so we use a hierarchy and instancing to our advantage, coming in here and then being able to now rotate these in and out. And that just makes things a lot easier when we go into model this, and also maybe when we start to rig and animate it. Okay, so at this point, once we have all of the pieces of the engine done, we can start to group everything together. So we've got this initial group. Let's go ahead and call this thrust, and then we can drop this into our engine group, and that will allow us to move it around. We want to make sure to get our two cones in there as well. All right, so once we have that, we can go ahead and show our ship. We can take our engine, and now let's move it into position. So taking the whole engine, once we've got it built, moving it over into position from the front and from the side. Move it back in here. You can see it sticks out a little bit in the back, which is what we want. May shorten that up a little bit, but otherwise I think it's looking good. Okay, so once we've got the engine created, the next thing that we want to do is to go ahead and build some sort of large scoop shapes on the side, or vents on the side of our main fuselage. So we can do that by duplicating or converting rather geometry, and then extruding, doing some extruding and smoothing. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that process in the next lesson.